Hello, everybody. It's a beautiful day. Today is March 3rd, 2022. This is a segment of Dose of Reality on YouTube. My name is Riel, and today I am going to be continuing the presentation that I did that I published a couple of days ago, exploring Heather Stefanson and exploring how we can practically and pragmatically take policies and agendas that are being talked about on a global level and show how they're being implemented at a local level. So we are thinking globally, but acting locally. Let me just share my screen here. Okay, so we are going to get right into it, except it takes a little bit of time to properly show. And let's see. So as a recap of the investigation part one, exploring Heather Stefanson, we looked at social impact bonds, we looked at the new normal, we looked at the leadership election funkiness, we looked at stakeholders, health coalitions against lifting mandates. So what else can we find on the Premier of Manitoba? And of course, I just want to leave this screen here that you can pause and read up about, because this was the final slide of the first presentation. This is kind of one of the big picture things that I'm trying to lay a foundation for us to understand. And I believe that the social impact bonds are a precursor to exactly what this corporate social credit system is going to be coming to Manitoba in the very near future. So we got to stay vigilant, especially when we hear the leader of the Premier saying we have to go to a new normal. And I already explained where the new normal is from. So please refer to the first video I did on this little series. So first up, we're going to be looking at an article from September 2nd, 2021. The PC leadership candidate Steffensen vows to earn trust after being health minister during difficult third wave. We already looked at this article in the first presentation, but what I didn't show you in that same article was this paragraph here. She's addressing a fine. So Heather Stefanson also addressed a blemish on her professional record that has been making the rounds on social media once more. A $3,000 fine she received in 2002 from the Investment Dealers Association for a pair of trades she made while suspended in 1999. Steffensen said that she had failed to complete some continuing education while she was caring for her mother, who had ovarian cancer at the time. She explained that it's basically the equivalent of getting a ticket at an expired meter, of why she received the fine of $3,000 while being suspended in 1999 for making a pair of trades. She goes on to say that Heather Stefanson said she has no other skeletons in her closet and is prepared for the scrutiny of a leadership campaign. Well, consider this little series challenge accepted. Now, what I want to also just mention is, spoiler alert, this video will be talking about UFOs, believe it or not. And that is one of the big picture things that I am very passionate about. But before I get into the woo-woo stuff, we got to lay a foundation of this three-dimensional world and what's really going on. So here's another article from January 28th, 2022. The Manitoba Premier failed to follow disclosure rules on $31 million in property sales. Subheadline is a rental, commercial properties sold in 2016 and 2019. So the Premier, Heather Stefanson, is apologizing for failing to follow the rules of disclosure on real estate sales worth tens of millions of dollars, in apparent violation of the province's conflict of interest rules for politicians. The sales of 3 Winnipeg rental and commercial properties owned by McDonald Grain Company Limited, which is a real estate holding company that lists Steffensen as a director, fetched a combined sum of $31.2 million when they were sold in 2016 and 2019. In 2019, the company sold the Ritz apartment building at 859 Grosvenor Avenue for $7 million, and the Drury Manor apartment complex at 1833 Pembina Highway for $22.5 million. Manitoba business records, which list shareholders with 10% or more of voting shares in a company, show Steffensen holds 20 common shares in McDonald Grain Company. And we have her saying that she acknowledged that she failed to follow the rule of Manitoba's Conflict of Interest Act, which says the MLA must notify the clerk of the Legislative Assembly within 30 days if they dispose any asset. She says that it was an oversight on my part. That is being corrected immediately. So I wonder what that means. It is being corrected immediately. So she failed to submit a form that stated the sale had to be disclosed within 30 days. She apologizes to Manitobans for her error in not filing any form and disclosing the sale of these assets within the 30-day timeline. So we have the NDP leader Wab Kinew saying, it's disappointing to see the premier didn't follow the rules around $31 million worth of property while she was an elected official. And we have Dougald Lamont, who I have brought up in a previous presentation, actually, about his thoughts on the disgraceful restriction, the disgraceful act of restrictions being lifted, claiming that they cause no harm and that he was annoyed by the suggestion that they cause harm. Liberal leader Dougald Lamont says that the MLAs can legally vote on bills that benefit their businesses. They can take gifts if they own property outside of the province. They don't have to declare it. And despite all those loopholes, the premier still could not follow those rules. The article continues. So in response to the letter from Washalee, the Conflict of Interest Commissioner said he could not give an opinion on the matter because it relates to another member. However, a private citizen who suspects there may have been a breach can file an affidavit with the Court of Queen's Bench at a cost of $300 to ask a judge for a hearing with another judge. Washalee also proceeds to say that this is a matter that concerns the ability of Manitobans to trust their leaders are following the laws and that the law applies to all Manitobans equally, regardless of their political position. And I agree with that completely in principle. However, as the CBC articles will show us, that we know that it is rules for thee and not for me, with all of the people that are in elected positions and are CEOs of companies that took their traveling trips around the world, went to go see families while so many of us were all of us were actually locked down in our homes. We know that a lot of these higher up folks in higher socioeconomic classes and elected positions don't have to follow the rules. So who is Heather Stefanson? Well, let's just do a little background check on Wikipedia, which is what I have right here. All I want to bring up really is that she worked as a special assistant in the office of the Prime Minister under Brian Mulroney before returning to Manitoba in 1993. The Wikipedia article says that Steffensen was an investment advisor for Wellington West Capital in Winnipeg from 1995 to 2000. In 2003, Wellington West Capital was fined $13,000 for failing to supervise the activities of Steffensen. She had been suspended from acting in the capacity of a registered representative, but had issued statements to clients indicating her as a registered representative during this suspension. She was also a member of U of M's Young Associates organization. That's fine. So the CBC article that we have here is talking about first, she received a fine. Heather Stefanson received a $3,000 fine for making deals while she was suspended. The Investment Dealers Association, the IDA, gave her that $3,000 fine. Now, here we have, she worked for Wellington West Capital when she made those advisement trades, deals, advisories, while she was suspended. And the Wellington West Capital was actually fined $13,000 for failing to supervise the activities of Steffensen. So not only her, but the firm themselves were fined by the IDA. because she had been suspended from acting in the capacity of a registered representative, but had issued statements to clients indicating her as a registered representative during the suspension. Okay, so here we have an article from 2003, October 31st, from the Investment Executive, saying the IDA finds Wellington West and the compliance officer. So the supervision of suspended rep deemed inadequate. The Manitoba District Council of the Investment Dealers Association of Canada has imposed disciplinary penalties on Wellington West Capital Inc. and its chief compliance officer, Daniel McDonald. On October 20th, the IDA accepted a settlement agreement pursuant to which McDonald admitted that he failed to carry out certain of his responsibilities as ultimate designated person and chief compliance officer, namely that he failed to adequately supervise the activities of a suspended registered representative. In the same settlement agreement, Wellington West admitted that while Heather Dorothy Steffensen was suspended from acting in the capacity of a registered representative, it issued client statements indicating her as a registered representative and remunerated her in part based on transactions in accounts bearing her name. So she received remuneration. Remuneration? Is that a typo? Remuneration. She received remuneration in part based on transactions in accounts bearing her name. The IDA fined McDonald, the compliance officer, $6,000, and Wellington West $13,000, and it ordered Wellington West to pay $3,439 for investigation costs. Okay. So, did a little DuckDuckGo search here because I don't use the G word. That's just not a reliable source of information these days. DuckDuckGo is my preference. So I look up Daniel McDonald, Wellington West Capital, and what comes up? Well, here's what I found here. So from the Investment Industry Regulatory Organization of Canada, we have an enforcement notice hearing in the matter of Wellington West Capital, which is now National Bank Financial Inc., and Daniel John McDonald, a discipline hearing. This hearing from March 23rd, 2012, this hearing concerns allegations that the Wellington West Capital Inc. sold Opti Canada Inc. shares to clients at prices higher than those available on the market, and that Wellington and Mr. McDonald failed to make reasonable inquiries regarding the purchase of Opti shares and the subsequent allocation of these shares to clients. In March 2006, Wellington sold Opti shares to clients at prices higher than those available on the market. Interesting. So Mr. McDonald failed to properly carry out his responsibilities as Wellington's ultimate designated person and chief compliance officer. Namely, he failed to make reasonable inquiries regarding the March 2006 purchase of Opti shares. Okay, so Wellington West sold Opti shares at higher prices than those available on the market. Now, that excess money, could that excess money be sent to people behind the scenes? Could this be a discrete form of money laundering, perhaps? Something like that? And what is Opti? What is Opti Canada? And it's interesting that these accusations of this gentleman came at the same time that Heather Stefanson was fined while she was actually suspended, but still making deals, and that she ended up getting fined for. So there is some overlap with this individual who seems to be unable to properly oversee financial transactions. Interesting. Okay, yeah, just recapping some of the things I already said. So just now, to build up of everything that we've now it gets even more interesting. Is there potential, some sort of behind the scenes financial dealings that we've got, as well as she was a special assistant in the office of the Prime Minister under Mulroney. So it was interesting is because I couldn't actually find any information on McDonald Grain Limited. I actually went to the licensed grain companies on .gc.ca, and it does not appear on the directory. So I wonder if that has anything to do with what Heather Stefanson is saying, that it is being corrected immediately. You mean being wiped off the internet? Ooh, sorry. Yeah. So in addition, so we have and I was looking at the McDonald Grain Company because separately from we have two separate situations. You've got the Wellington West and the Opti Canada shares, where Steffensen was a suspended agent making deals that got caught and fined. And then separately, we have her failing to disclose that she's the president of a company called McDonald Grain Company. And she was the director of the real estate company with 20 common shares. So, you know, just through some surface level researching on the internet, all I could really find is that, yes, there is a McDonald Grain Company, and the long tenure president of that company, Julian Hugh McDonald, passed away. So he passed away in 2008. However, I do want to point out that the last name of Daniel Mr. McDonald is the same last name of McDonald Grain Company. Could there be any connections there? Interesting. So what's up? Next is looking into Opti Canada. Opti Canada on Wikipedia is a Calgary, Alberta-based oil sands development company established in 1999. However, Opti was founded as Ormat Process Technologies, Inc. in 1999 by Israeli energy company Ormat Industries. Okay, and I also try to go to opticanada.com, website not found. Interesting. So we have this company that shares were sold. Wellington West sold Opti shares to clients at higher prices than those available on the market. And Opti shares, Opti Canada, Opti goes back to this Israeli energy company, Ormat Industries. Interesting. In the research that I've been doing, we find actually a lot of subsidiaries and other third-party companies, shell companies. A lot of them have their roots in Israel. And I'm not going to go any deeper than that with this company because that's its own. That's getting too international for this presentation, and I don't want to go there. But I do just want to make note of that Ormat. This is their logo right here. Ormat, which is the parent company to Opti, or Opti was founded by Ormat. So Ormat, their parent company was Ormat Industries Limited, which developed an energy-efficient technology or crude for extracting oil from oil sands. So I just want to mention that on the Wikipedia page itself, they have spin-offs. This concept of spin-offs, similar to what I'm saying about subsidiaries and other companies involved with it, merges, etc. When you look into the financial dealings, a lot of these corporations, as we already saw with Wellington West being bought out by National Bank Financial Inc. So Wellington West Capital doesn't exist anymore. It is now National Bank Financial Inc. So just keeping that in mind of maybe being able to cover your tracks and such when you're dealing with maybe behind the scenes financial dealings. So, okay, we've got some skeletons in the closet, if you will. Now, what else has Heather Stefanson been involved with? Well, again, referring to the Manitoba government website of press releases, here we have from 2017, January 23, 2017. So this is the same archived website that I found the social impact bonds on. So here is an announcement where the province commits to new legislation that would reduce red tape, be the first of its kind among provinces. So the quote is, I just typed it up here because I know that's a little hard to see. The Manitoba government is marking the beginning of Red Tape Awareness Week by making a commitment to introduce new legislation that would reduce the burden of regulatory requirements. Reduce the burden of regulatory requirements, says Deputy Premier Heather Stefanson. So she was the Deputy Premier. So in 2017, she's a Deputy Premier. And 2019, she was the Families Minister. 2019, she was also or I guess in 2020, she was the Health Minister, and 2022, she is the Premier of Manitoba. So just throwing that out there that she reduced the burden of regulatory requirements, that all of this would come into force in 2021. Now here is where my research is going to start to get a little more galactic and far out there, if you will. And this is really the kind of stuff that I'm passionate about. So I can't wait to get in there. I just didn't want to start so strong to the folks listening to my videos by getting right into the UFO and extraterrestrial, non-terrestrial topics, but that is what I'm actually truly passionate about. So I wanted to lay a foundation of things and try to make myself approachable, I suppose, and help you understand that I'm coming at this from a sane, rational perspective. At least I think so. But I might be insane. That's fine. So here we have another press release from the Manitoba government. And the headline is Manitoba government, aerospace and business communities call on federal government to stand up for Manitoba aerospace industry. So maintaining a strong aerospace presence in Western Canada is in the national interest, said the Premier. And of course, this is published by the Premier at the time, Brian Pallister, and the Deputy Premier at the time, Heather Stefanson. So the quote is from Pallister, as one of the largest aerospace hubs in the country, the continued growth of Manitoba's critical mass of equipment and expertise is dependent upon investment, innovation, and the continuation of fair and open procurement policies. He continues saying that combined, these factors will allow firms to maintain their local presence and global competitiveness. A strong and competitive aerospace industry will result in the creation of high-value jobs and the strengthening of Manitoba's economy. Yep, okay. So, well, let's take a look. Let's do a little bit of a deep dive here. The Manitoba Aerospace Incorporated. Interesting. Honestly, before this little rabbit hole that I went down, I did not know about this company, this corporation, or this incorporation. Manitoba Aerospace Incorporated. And of course, they've got the land acknowledgements because that's just essential right now as growing companies. You have to express those kind of things. Now, let's just take note of the vision here. Manitoba Aerospace is a network of excellence. A network of excellence. Okay. And down here, you see the partners and their funding partners, Government of Canada, Government of Manitoba, funding. It's all government funded. Okay. So please feel free to pause and just read this website. I'm not going to cover all of it with you, but as I'm just reviewing this, I wish I'd highlighted this term here. If you can follow it under values, visionary. Visionary, in our perspective, we continually improve programs and services in order to meet and or exceed our stakeholders' need in a fiscally responsible manner. So we want to exceed our stakeholders' needs. Interesting. Here we have proactive as well. Stakeholders. We'll be proactive in our strategic planning, innovative in the solutions we implement, and responsive to our stakeholder needs. So you got the stakeholder references with the unions, with the teachers associations, and now with the aerospace industry. Fascinating. And of course, that's probably a normal term. I get it. But the thing is to relay stakeholder capitalism to the World Economic Forum. That's the whole point of emphasizing these terms, is because those terms are being used from the World Economic Forum, and I believe that's where all of this is kind of being rooted in. And as some just little examples of their network of excellence, you've got these multiple corporations here, the Advanced Composite Structures, Aero Recip, Argus Industries, Babcock Canada, Belcan. There's probably 50 to 60. There's a lot. You can go to this website up here, manitobaerospace.ca. To find their members, but I want to focus on this one here, the Royal Aviation Museum of Western Canada. Why am I focusing on this one? Well, because the new museum will be located adjacent to the Winnipeg James A. Richardson International Airport and is set to open in late 2021. So, as I'm giving this broadcast from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, I find it fascinating that the new museum will be located adjacent to the Winnipeg James A. Richardson International Airport. So we've got the Royal Aviation Museum of Western Canada. And they talk about the Canada's first helicopter, the Junkers The flying boxcar, which can be seen nowhere else in the world. Okay, well, let's see what else we can find. And here we have aircraft collection with over 90 aircraft. The Royal Aviation Museum of Western Canada has one of Canada's largest and most historically significant aviation collections. The Vickers Viscount VC2 model, the Bristol Aerospace Black Brant IVB sounding rocket replica, and, what is this? Really, what is that? The Avro Canada VZ9 Avrocar? Now, what does that look like to you? Wow. Okay, so as I said, we'd be getting to UFO stuff. Well, here we have it. Here we have the Avrocar, Canada's flying saucer project at the Royal Aviation Museum of Western Canada, a flying saucer project. Okay, I honestly did not expect to be going here when I first started looking into the new normal and social impact bonds, but here we are. Now, this is actually very interesting because I did a previous presentation just for the Patreons of Generation Z about Avi Loeb, who is the academic face of the alien agenda, and he is almost single-handedly revolutionizing the academic perspective on alien life. And that is something that we will definitely be exploring later. But again, like I said, I wanted to just build up a foundation. This isn't woo-woo, this isn't esoteric. Well, it is esoteric, but it's not in the way of being woo-woo and far out there. This is literally in the museum. So just some information. Now, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive. This is still about Heather Stefanson, but, you know, we're taking a bit of a tangent here, if you will, explaining that in 1953, the Royal Canadian Air Force and British intelligence held a top secret meeting in West Germany to investigate an enduring aviation myth. A German engineer claimed to have worked on a flying saucer for the Luftwaffe between 1944 and 1945. Avro Canada's chief designer, John Frost, also attended the meeting and cross-examined the engineer. The engineer told Frost that the covert flying saucer achieved flight by generating a cushion of thrust between itself and the ground. After it was tested successfully, the saucer was destroyed, along with the drawings, to avoid capture by the Allies. History does not record what influence this meeting had on John Frost's designs, but soon Avro Canada would construct its own top-secret flying saucer. Okay, so wow. Soon Avro Canada would construct its own top secret flying saucer. And that occurred from a meeting between British intelligence and the Royal Canadian Air Force in West Germany. Okay? A German engineer claimed to have worked on a flying saucer at the Luftwaffe between 1944 and 1945. So this little segment here we're doing is actually setting the foundation for future talks that I'm going to be getting into, and guests that I will actually be having on the show who specialize in the galactic history of Earth, extraterrestrial intelligence, non-human intelligence, plasma intelligence, craft propulsion, and explaining the physics of craft propulsion. Exopolitics, so the idea that there's been intergalactic interference with human governments since at least the 50s, probably even before then. I personally believe, you know, thousands and thousands, if not millions of years ago, but that's, you know, a lot more far out there, I understand, and we're gonna work to getting there. I'm trying to ease you all into my world here, easing you into my reality. Thanks for allowing me to say that pun. But yeah, so continuing. Actually, you know what? It's just probably better. I've already read that top one, so be better if you just pause this video and read this for yourself. Because it is all fascinating information, but I'm just presenting it here. And yeah, next up, just a little info on John Carver Meadows Frost. John Carver Meadows Frost was a British aircraft designer. Primary contributions centered on pioneering supersonic British experimental aircraft, and as the chief designer who shepherded Canada's first jet fighter project. He was the major force behind the Avro Canada VTOL, which stands for, I believe it's the Vertical Takeoff Landing Aircraft Projects. And he was the unheralded creator of the Avro Canada Flying Saucer Project. This is on Wikipedia right here. So just some information about Avro Canada, the de Havilland DH-1808 Swallow, and just allowing you to you pause this video and read up about this. I just find it interesting that it has 108. I didn't even mention this or notice this in the Generation Z stream that I did, but the number 108 is a recurring number that comes up all the time. Why did they choose 108 for this swallow? Very interesting, because 108 has deep significance in various cultures and various religions around the world. For example, you do 108 sun salutations at, like, the summer equinox and solstice or new moon. Yes, that's just one example. So proceeding to more information on Wikipedia. This is just Wikipedia, open source information. And anything on here that they will put with asterisks or say it's pseudoscientific or conspiracy theory. None of this is conspiracy theory. None of this is pseudoscientific. All of this is legitimate and real. This is history. This is aviation history. So here we have a picture of the Avro VZ9 Avrocar. Look at that being, eh? So yeah, again, just pause and read up on this yourself, but I just want to breeze through this and talk about the Special Projects Group. So John Meadows Frost, this is who we're referring to, Frost made a proposal that Avro start an experimental project based on vertical takeoff and landing concepts, VTOL. The quote is, "It was not a case of Frost indulging on personal whim. The idea of a saucer-like flying machine had revolutionary implications then and still does. It's like a bumblebee. There's no way it should fly. It only does so because of the wing, which gives it lift and the engine's power to overcome the drag of the fuselage, the load, the tall plane, the stabilizers, the fins, and the engines." Well, okay, well, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt here. Shortly after its formation in 1952, Frost's Special Project Group started a paper study on Pancake Engine. Again, just the Special Projects Group. So across from the company headquarters, the group had all the accoutrements of a top secret operation, including security guards, locked doors, and special pass cards. Cool. Then, of course, the Project Y down here with the Konanja effect. I don't know what that is. I'm not looking into that today, but in future ones, we absolutely will. The aircraft propulsion and control, the patent of course, though, for Project Y, the plug got pulled when government funding from the Defense Research Board dried up. Now, that is something that I am gonna just allow them to say on the surface, but I do think that behind the scenes, it's a whole world of black budget projects and going underground. And as we know today, with the current disclosure of UFOs, clearly they continue some research, at least. Probably under a different name, different operation, or they relocated it to New Zealand or Australia. But anyway, of course, and then the Y2 weapon system. But yeah, feel free to pause it and read it. But just actually here we have the US patent number 3124323, the aircraft propulsion and control. That was known as the Frost patent, one of many Frost patents. And just continuing down this tangent with looking at Avro Canada as a Canadian aircraft manufacturing company. Of course, so it is a subsidiary. Avro Canada is a subsidiary company, industry in the aerospace. Now I'm doing this all because of the announcement from Heather Stefanson talking about the importance of the aerospace industry in Western Canada and tying this into the upcoming, the push for UFO disclosure and non-human intelligence and a potential agenda of a fake alien invasion. And a threat from outer space to unite global governments for a unified planetary government. This is all connected. I'm just building a bit of a foundation for us to get there eventually. May happen soon. Never mind. So yeah, just more subsidiaries of Avro Canada is Orenda Engines, Canadian Car and Foundry. So again, just mentioning the subsidiary concept. And Avro Canada has extensive work. If anybody's interested in aviation history, please read up about this. It's very cool. The supersonic Avrodynes, again, the 8 engineers and draftsmen created the Avro Special Projects Group. In its intense exploration of radical aeronautical design ideas and development of new technology, as well as security, the SPG resembled Lockheed's Skunk Works. And now, for those that don't know Skunk Works, that's an amazing dive. That's essentially where Lockheed, one of the world's largest defense contractors that produces fighter jets and other weapons and technology. Skunk Works is basically their kind of hidden or very special department where they focus on technology that isn't really publicly available. So initial projects included research and development work on a series of flying saucer-like vehicles. The only design that materialized beyond mock-up was the VZ9 AV Avrocar, funded entirely by the US military from 1956. And so, of course, you got the Project Y1, Project Y2, the Avrocar, and but the Avrocar was proposed to the US Army as a type of flying Jeep. Okay, flying Jeep. Interesting. And of course, the latter Avrocar was dismantled but put into storage circa 2002 due to increasing deterioration because it was deployed outside and the museum was very close to the ocean. This museum was in Virginia, not in Manitoba. And then, of course, we just have the mention of the Space Threshold Vehicle. Space Threshold Vehicle, the Avrostat. Developed by the Advanced Projects Group in June 1958 report by Avro's engineering department described a space threshold vehicle intended to, quote, get a man into the threshold of space and recover him, flying back through the corridor, where winged flight was possible between maximum altitude that could sustain lift from a winged vehicle and maximum tolerable structural temperature. Cool. And then I think that this is my final little dive on this aerospace industry. Can I put my face? Sure, just right there. I'm not the reason. Focus more on the messages than my face. Thank you. Orenda Engines, of course, is a subsidiary. Now, just interesting is also to notice that the origins of Orenda Engines. The origins of the company stem from World War II. During the war, National Research Council of Canada ran a small aerodynamics effort similar to NACA in the United States, or Royal Aircraft Establishment in the United Kingdom. In 1942, they sent 2 of their researchers in the UK to take a survey of their efforts and report on what fields of study the Canadians should focus on in order to avoid duplication. Now, pay attention to this. Over the next year, a number of members in the NRC's Aerodynamics Lab traveled. The NRC is the National Research Council. So over the next year, a number of members of the NRC's Aerodynamics Lab traveled to the UK, and in May 1943, they published their findings in the Top Secret Report on Development of Jet Propulsion in the United Kingdom, widely known as the Banks Report. Now, it's is red here because there is no page for the Banks Report. There is no Wikipedia page for the Banks Report. So unfortunately, if I'm using just the established open source information, there is no information here. And yeah, that's all I really wanted to bring about here. And just some more interesting little tidbits that I found from looking at the subsidiaries. And I'm just finding things on Wikipedia, seeing things that I'm interested in, then going down that hole and trying to find connections. So $1, this is less so specifically about Heather Stefanson, but just putting some more context into how some of these things may operate when we look at people that receive financial kickback for making financial trades while they are a suspended agent, and how chief compliance officers may fail to oversee proper dealings and they get fined, and then what happens to them behind the scenes. So this term is $1 salary. A number of top executives in large businesses and governments have worked for a $1 salary. $1 salaries are used in situations where an executive wishes to work without direct compensation, but for legal reasons must receive a payment above zero so as to distinguish them from a volunteer. As we have down here talking about World War I, interwar, New Deal, and World War II, information about people doing that. Ooh, in Canada during World War II, C.D. Howe, Canada's Minister of Everything, created a rearmament program for $1 a year men. And I'm just going to write that down because I did not even see that when I put this together. So C.D. Howe, okay, Minister of Everything. Huh. Well, stay tuned on what I find with that. Thank you very much. Now, the following people have been employed for annual salaries for $1. Again, this is all on Wikipedia, so take it as you will. Arnold Schwarzenegger, David Lloyd George, the former Prime Minister of the UK, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Eric Schmidt of Google, Herbert Hoover, former President of the US, Jack Dorsey of Twitter, Sean Coom of WhatsApp, Jeremy Stoppelman of Yelp, Jerry Yang of Yahoo, John F. Kennedy, former President of the US, John Corzine, Governor of New Jersey, Larry Ellison, Oracle Corporation, Larry Page, Alphabet Inc., Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, Richard Fairbank, Capital One Financial, Richard Hain, Urban Outfitters, Sihat Sutarja, Marvel Technology Group, Sergey Brin, Alphabet Inc., Steve Jobs, Apple, Terry Semel, Yahoo, Vikram Pandit, Citigroup, William Clay Ford Jr., Ford Motor Company. Now another on the same page of $1 salaries, there is a suggestion to read about the peppercorn. So I figured might as well include that in this as well. A peppercorn, in legal parlance, is a metaphor for a very small cash payment or other nominal considerations used to satisfy the requirements for the creation of a legal contract. A peppercorn does not cease to be good consideration if it is established that the promisee does not like pepper and will throw away the corn. Okay, whatever. What does that mean? The term is more or less synonymous with a pittance, something of minimal value. Now, as again, we have in the leases in real estate property. Now, this is why I'm including this here, because it's fascinating. As we see, the land on which the Ontario Legislative Building resides was leased by the University of Toronto for a peppercorn of 999 years. Now, that's just fascinating. What? Because a common example of the English practice of peppercorn rent, the nominal rental sum for property, land, or buildings where a rental contract is put in place and the owner of the property wishes it to be rent-free, it is normal to charge a small sum as peppercorn rent, because if the owner wants to lease the property, he must charge some rent so that consideration exists for both parties. Also called a virtual freehold. So we can also look at down here, just kind of throwing this into the mix, is transactions involving actual peppercorns. The Masonic Lodge of St. George's, Bermuda, perhaps any relation to the Bermuda Triangle and any sort of architecture that's around there, which is another fantastic rabbit hole to explore. So they rent the old state house as the lodge, as its lodge for the annual sum of a single peppercorn presented to the governor of Bermuda on a velvet cushion atop a silver platter in an annual ceremony performed since 1816 or about April 23. Right on. And we are nearing the conclusion of my presentation for today. I thought that I would keep a timer for myself, but I did not. So I'll say I'm at about 35 minutes, not too sure. But this last piece is an alleged memo dated February 11th, 2022, about the Canada-US border blockade at Emerson. Apparently, this is from the Honorable Heather Stefanson to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So just let's look at what she wrote. Here's the letter. I typed it up saying, I write to urge immediate and effective federal action regarding the blockade activity now unfolding at the Canada-US border crossing station at Emerson, Manitoba, part of a series of damaging protest activities now occurring at international border crossings across the country. You will be aware that the Emerson location in Manitoba's main U.S. border entry point, responsible for facilitating almost all essential north-south commercial trucking operations. This is a critical trade corridor, and orderly and constant traffic flow is an indispensable link in the supply chain relied upon by all Manitobans. Blockades that disrupt this critical corridor, even temporarily, create potential danger, impose hardships on all Manitobans, and cause severe economic losses and damage to the Manitoba and Canadian businesses. So the important thing here is that, respectfully, these evolving and increasing border disruption in Manitoba and elsewhere across the country regulate the require and reasoned the reasoned and balanced approach and balanced national leadership that you and the federal government can provide. When I was typing this up, it even was a little confusing. So, take this with a grain of salt. I haven't called Premier Heather Stefanson to ask her if she actually wrote this, but well, yeah. So, of course, to stabilize our international trade routes with our most important ally and trading partner, to de-escalate the domestic tensions that are causing these harmful developments, and to protect the essential interests of all Canadians. A clear and clearly communicated plan is required while immediate engagement occurs. She would welcome any discussion on potential federal provincial collaborative action that might be of assistance. So I believe that this was the letter that was written that made the news when Manitoba was included in the provinces that did not support the Federal Emergency Measures Act. And it's interesting because with Alberta, Ontario, Manitoba, they essentially all resolved the border trucker disputes, the conflicts of the critical trade corridors without the Federal Emergency Measures Act. But could we say that she is implying that she's okay for Trudeau to have used it? The language is very political, so just going to let you decide on that. But and I bring that up because this is where this is my introduction to my very deeper rabbit hole stuff. We have here, this is an Illuminati card game that was public, that's been around for decades. It actually had a card in there about the trucker going on strike, and apparently if we look at this Freedom Convoy 2022 logo, who made it, where'd it come from? Well, it looks like this, which looks like these numbers here, 666. So paying attention to the numerological side of things is actually very important. There's a lot of symbology and logos. I will be exploring all of those very, in the coming weeks, because symbology is one of my favorite topics as well. And this is a little introduction to Gematria, which is a way to use numerology to break down words, to understand what they really mean and how there's kind of a fourth dimensional chess game that's being played. So, and I added this little comment here just as of today, even though I've already done this presentation in the past to Generation Z's Patreon account. I just wanted to bring this up because Leah Gazan, the member of parliament in Winnipeg, the NDP Winnipeg Center, she was talking about the 4 self-appointed organizers of the convoy as justification for calling them racists, extremists, sanctioning the funds, and the justification for the state of emergency. And of course, if we're going to be looking at this logo and emblem and look at how this number here and this card here implies to me that this was planned well in advance. And this trucker convoy, the forces knew that that was going to happen. And this is going to be very controversial to a lot of folks, but I do think that the 4 main organizers of that trucker convoy were government agents, government plants. So feel free to comment about that. I will happily elaborate in future talks or message me privately. But yes, so just as a total recap here, just so that I put everything in one nice little summary for you all. We know that Heather Stefanson was involved in receiving payment while she was a suspended advisor. Money was sent to bank accounts under her name. The chief compliance officer, Daniel McDonald at Wellington West Capital, was fined for not supervising Steffensen properly. Essentially, he allowed the money to be sent to her. Wellington West was bought out by National Bank Financial, and Daniel McDonald was also under investigation for selling shares of Opti Canada at higher prices than listed. Opti Canada is traced to Israel, and this is where I stop for now. But the supervisor failing to keep tabs on her makes me think of the security guards that were responsible for overseeing Epstein the day that he killed himself. As well as we have that Steffensen failed to disclose that she was the director of a real estate holding company at McDonald Grain Company, which with sales valued at 31.2 million between 2016 and 2019, she was a holder of 20 common shares of that company. And McDonald is the last name of her supervisor at Wellington West Capital. And then McDonald Grain Company does not appear in the listings of Manitoba current grain companies. Steffensen was the deputy premier when the province announced the emphasis on the aerospace industry, as well as she was involved with cutting the red tape. So in addition to the social impact bonds, the new normal, the laying foundation for a new normal in Manitoba, got the aerospace industry. And is it possible that the new normal has anything to do with the Avro Canada flying saucer in Winnipeg Museum? And of course, I made this note for Dave to take it away, my partner, and he, in Generation Z, he goes deep into the suppressed UFO operation. So please check out Generation Z at YouTube, Generation Z at the Generation Z podcast on Patreon, where I'm also a behind the scenes contributor. And of course, we looked into John Frost with the special projects, subsidiary companies, Orenda, and opens a whole new door of local investigations. So in summary, this is it. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day. I am pumped. Life is great. I am super excited for anybody that's been listening to it. I love that I've gotten some comments both from the Gen Z community, and now I'm finding some more local people in Winnipeg. And also part 2 of my presentations have now been featured on Zero Anthropology on Telegram. So very excited about that. Thank you so much. And with that, I hope you have a fantastic day, and much love and peace to you all. We will continue the research very soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.